Well, since we're talking about vitamin D, I know you guys also had some interesting research about dementia risk and vitamin D. A little bit controversial. What do we got? What is going on?
Yeah, so you shared with us an interesting article titled "Sunshine: A Natural Dementia Drug." Adults adults with high vitamin D levels are up to a third less likely to suffer memory-robbing condition, study finds. And so the researchers analyzed brain tissue from nearly 300 people in Chicago. All had died within the last 6 years and agreed to take part of the study. Participants with more vitamin D in their brains were less likely, according to the article, to have dementia. And so that's pretty powerful stuff, I would say. And there are many sort of ways that we can look at this. And the actual study that they looked at, brain vitamin D forms cognitive decline and neuropathology in community dwelling older adults. They want to explore more why those with higher vitamin D concentrations in the brain maybe showed less cognitive decline with time.
Right.
And so, Joey, I don't know if you want to step in a little bit.
So there's a correlation here between fewer people. If you had high vitamin D levels in your brain, you were less likely to have evidence of dementia and Alzheimer's and other dementia-related diseases in your brain tissue. That's the correlation. And so the question is this causal or what's going on? Am I guessing correctly based on that?
That's sort of like where they ended everything. They say, hey, this is what we observed. There's something here. But there is a potential for some reverse causation, but it's worth continuing to
research,
to sort of dig. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And maybe I'll start with a critique and then we can start to build into the positives.
Sure.
I mean, they're leading into this. I just kind of off record, off topic. I saw that there was even a vitamin D study in individuals who had already had progressed in their course of Alzheimer's disease. They were taking vitamin D, and they saw that the supplementation actually correlated with almost worsened, almost like an
aggravated condition.
Yes, in a sense. So all of that's to say, there's a flip side to there's always a flip side to everything. But
yes.
we're doing our best to look at the totality of the evidence, and just because we're looking at one study does not imply that we're ignoring what else.
So this is not conclusive. Yeah. This is very much still open-ended research. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I think what was really interesting too is that they did see differences in dementia, which would basically mean how they were functioning, testing their function, but they did not see any difference in amyloid plaque development. So those who had further along, full-blown, we'll call it Alzheimer's diagnosis, or Lewy body dementia, things that are measurable beyond, cognitive testing that are actually, that you can test an MRI and see. They didn't find any difference in those people with the vitamin D.
That's fascinating.
So there's somewhere along the line, though, potentially that, despite having the physical manifestation of the Alzheimer's, that you are not as likely to have the outward manifestation of it and the symptomology of it because your vitamin D level was high. That is not a mechanism that I can explain, or that I think that they explained in the article.
Right.
But I did find that really interesting, that both in the good and the bad. Well, that would lead me to believe is why. Sometimes whenever I see data, I want to know why. I think that just helps me to process it, remember it, parlay it in other things potentially. But I found that really interesting.
I know there was a big hubbub a little while ago about some Vanderbilt University scientists casting a lot of doubt on past amyloid plaque research with relation to Alzheimer's. Is it possible that they are not directly related, or that they're not directly correlated, and that could explain why you can have buildup without the manifestation?
It's possible. It seems like it's a pretty hardcore diagnosis, though. And I know sometimes they don't test you or give you MRI because if the symptoms are so obvious and clear,
right,
sometimes they don't really bother even giving you the MRI.
Sure.
And it can be, tested and seen in an autopsy very easily.
Yeah.
But I would say that the link is pretty strong. That I would have to read that because that would be interesting. But as far as I know, that link is pretty strong.
Okay.
And there's just always, with all of these conditions, there is with heart disease, there's uncharted territory.
Yes.
And so there's certainly similar territory with Alzheimer's. And so this is what this study reveals, is that there's always maybe some different underlying pathologies occurring independently and, in connection with one another. And so who's to say that there's not another component to what's driving the progression of dementia outside of vitamin D or outside of the plaques. It is just more or less keeps things open-ended.
And in fact, there probably is something else driving it that we just don't know about yet, or some combination of things. And this is just one more little piece of information.
Yeah, because I found another study that shows that it did have effect on the amyloid plaques.
Wow.
That the vitamin D levels did. So I'd get anytime, medicine in general, you're going to see a lot of conflicting things at times, but especially when you're talking about supplementation and body levels of things, how accurate is 25 OHD reflecting, like
Sure.
Dante said before, in your tissues and in your cells, how accurate is that, level in your blood whenever you're talking. What's really important is what it's doing in your cells. What is your level in the cells? So there's different ways to look at it, but I did try to look at other studies. I did see this one, 21,784, again, observational study, but they only saw an effect whenever there was true deficiency. So they only saw, we'll say, better way to say it, they only saw a link with dementia below 20. So in what would be, there's different definitions of what's insufficient. Some medical bodies say there's an insufficiency at 10 to 19 and the only true deficiency is below 10. Others say below 20 and others say below 30.
Right.
So this one cut off at 20 and said below 20, they saw correlation. Above 20, they did not. So that's getting into true deficiency with dementia. So there's a lot of studies out there that do end up giving little bits of different information, but I think the link is pretty. Now, again, can we say that taking vitamin D whenever you're 35 and having a level at 40 and 50 for your whole life, does that prevent dementia? That's what I would want to know.
Right.
But that's going to require long term, because if you're going to develop dementia, let's just say, God forbid, at 65, and you start taking vitamin D at 64, I just can't imagine that that's going to stop it. So you may say, hey, they may do this study. I was taking vitamin D and I got dementia. It did nothing for me. But yeah, you've been taking it for a year, and that's a disease process that's been ongoing in your body for God knows how long.
Right.
So that's why I'm going to go back to 35, 40. That I would think this would, if there's a true causal relationship, not just a link, I think we can see that there is a correlation. We're still not sure of the causation.
Right.
The causation would have to be studied at an earlier age. In particular, there's a lot of people now that do that supplement with vitamin D for immune system issues, for potential autoimmune conditions, because their level's low, for bone issues. So people are out there doing it. It's just a matter of funding the study to see what's going on over long term.
Of course. All right. Well, so you're saying this is not bulletproof research. Run out and buy some vitamin D if you don't want to have Alzheimer's.
It's not bulletproof,
the cure-all.
But I guess the way I look at it, if you're listening to our show, et cetera, probably have a little bit of a bent towards supplements. I do. So when you see so much smoke around vitamin D in a positive way, bones, immune, inflammation, dementia, it's just another reason for me to continue to take it. So again, does that mean, the same? Am I saying again that once you do that, you're going to prevent dementia? No, right. I'm just saying that there's a lot of information out there. And is it irrefutable, bulletproof? No, but there's again so much in so many different ways that vitamin D to me is a no-brainer. And it's not super easy to get from food either. This is not like maybe B vitamins or minerals from meats and from vegetables. This is a little tougher. You've got to eat oily fish, tuna, salmon, egg yolks, organ meat, mushrooms. Those are the main sources. So again, how many people are sedentary and indoors? Basic. Yeah. Even myself, when I look at it a lot often, it's home to car, to work, to home, and I'm not getting any sunlight. And if I really look at the amount of time, so you're figuring that we're inside the vast majority of the time. You're only really intaking vitamin D when you have oily fish, eggs, maybe some mushrooms or organ meat. I mean, you're talking about, a real predisposition to have a deficiency in it, And when you look at it that way, now the thing about vitamin D is you can get a level checked and know where you are.
That's good. That's good. Dante, in an ideal world, if I want to increase my vitamin D levels before I take supplements, what should I be doing?
Yeah, Joey alluded to the difficulty in attaining an adequate amount from your diet.
I would just like to say for the record, I ate mushrooms and organ meat in the last week.
I love both. I do.
They're fantastic.
Yeah. So continue, striving to get those foods in your diet. They're beneficial for a multitude of reasons.
Yes.
So in addition to that, obviously, sunlight is the main source of vitamin D.
So I'm a plant?
So you're basically a plant. Yes.
With feelings?
Yeah. So there's it's a bit complicated, but UV light, near infrared light, and what happens at the level of the skin, it gets converted into, by the liver and the kidneys and such into the active form. And so they say that maybe 10 to 30 minutes a day of direct sunlight isn't the worst idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, depending on where you live, certain parts of the globe, it's easier to get that than others.
Sure.
Certain people have fairer skin and, yes, you want to get vitamin D from the sun, but you also don't want to sunburn either. That's not ideal, but just enough, get some sunlight, generally adequate, but without having a feel for maybe some of your other risk factors or underlying conditions or vitamin D levels. You're not going to know necessarily how much you need or if you need to pursue treatment. But similar to trying to attain vitamin D from your food, there's a whole host of other benefits, with getting sunlight.
I was gonna say, you can go for a walk, you can exercise and kill two birds with one stone. That's kind of a cool idea.